Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with today's guest, but we're going to give our sponsors a shout out. Stay with us. Don't hit that fast forward button. These are all companies I used or have a direct connection to. You should be using them too. So take a listen to our shout outs, then listen to our interview, and then check out each of these companies. You're going to be glad you did. We want to say thanks to Sideline Interactive indoor score tables and video boards. Go to their website, sidelineinteractive.com, and schedule a live web demo to see their score tables and their scoreboards in action. Their products not only generate income for your athletic department, but they also create the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. That's sidelineinteractive.com. We want to say thanks to Home Campus. Home Campus is a platform you're going to use every single day. Things like scheduling, student athlete eligibility and clearance. Who doesn't do that every day? Communication with your coaches, with your state association, uploading rosters, digital forms, you name it. Home Campus is going to do it better. It's going to do it faster. It's going to make your job a lot easier. And all you have to do to get started is go to homecampus.com. That's it. Go to homecampus.com. We want to thank Gipper. Go to Gipper.com and their team will help you start to create world-class content to promote your athletes, celebrate your teams. Gipper's used and trusted by over 4,000 high school and college programs across the country. It's professional graphic design made easy. How easy? So easy, even I can do it. Go to Gipper.com to get started. We want to thank Hometown Ticketing for their support. Hometown Ticketing is the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. Do I need to say anything more? Go to hometownticketing.com. It's digital ticketing that offers more. We also want to say thanks to Ohio University's online Master of Science in Athletic Administration. This affordable 20-month program focuses exclusively on interscholastic athletic administration. And when you finish the online courses, you'll not only have your master's degree, you're going to have 11 NIAAA leadership training courses to go toward your RAA and your CAA. You're also going to be part of a very large graduate network with connections all across the country in athletics. To get started, go to ohio.edu/info/MAA, Ohio University's online Masters in Athletic Administration. We want to thank Vital Signs Wall of Fame for their support. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards or your school's Hall of Fame, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com and check out their interactive touchscreen. That's right, touchscreen video consoles. It's also a great way to share your school's history and your proudest moments. The website is vitalsignswalloffame.com. Make sure you check them out today. We also want to say thanks to Huddle. Go to huddle.com and change the way you see the game. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I wanted a platform that was going to work for all of our teams, and Huddle came through like a champ. Our coaches, our kids, even our parents loved all the tools that Huddle provided that let our teams experience success at the highest level. Go to huddle.com, join the 8 million users. Turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to say thanks to Snap Raise. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraiser and got little, if any, return on investment? Stop right here. Go to snapraise.com. Hands down, the best online fundraising platform out there. We used it at our school. Tremendous success. Coaches loved it. Our parents loved it. It works. Go to snapraise.com. Check out their other great platforms. But if you're looking for a fundraiser, you found it. Go to snapraise.com to get started. And we want to say thanks to Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Athletic Surveys is about connections, and they're going to connect you to your stakeholders. You probably already hear back from the complainers, the gripers, but that's only a small percentage. Athletic Surveys will connect you to that group, but they're also going to connect you to the 98% that supports your program. And that information is tremendously valuable when you're talking to a frustrated parent or student athlete, or maybe your principal or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of everybody in your program. That's athleticsurveys.com. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. I say this just about every week, and it's true again this week. We've got a really cool guest. We're going to be visiting today with David Ribben. David's a certified master athletic administrator. He was a longtime athletic director for the University of Chicago Lab Schools and retired, but he's back on the job. He is serving as the interim AD at Winchester Thurston, which is an independent school in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So we're going to get to hear about the retirement aspect. We're also going to hear about, hey, life on the job right now. So David Ribben, welcome to the Educational AD Podcast.
Very good. Thanks, Jake. Glad to be here.
Well, I know it's a busy time. Spring is certainly, I think, the busiest time for athletic directors. So let's go ahead and jump right into it.
Sure.
We always like our listeners to have a chance to get to know our guests. So give us that quick bio, where you were born, where you grew up, maybe take us up through your own high school and college days, and then we'll take a break. But what's the David Ribben origin story?
Yeah, very good. Yeah, thanks, Jake. So I grew up in Holland, Michigan, and my dad was a teacher and a coach. So early on in my life, going to my dad's basketball games in Holland Christian High School in Holland, Michigan, with a family of 6 of us, it was a learning experience. So I think in some ways it was in my blood from the very beginning to be involved in athletics. After graduating and playing soccer, basketball, and ran track in high school, I played soccer in college at Calvin College up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. 4-year player and team captain all conference my senior year, and had a coach that was very influential in my life, Dr. Marv Zeidema. He was a person that was a faculty member at Calvin, and had a great experience with him as a faculty member, but also as a coach and a mentor. And he meant a lot to me during my life in college and after college as well. He was influential in me pursuing my master's degree. I obtained that in 1984 from Chicago State University. I began my career in part-time basis at Trinity Christian College. My wife and I married after we graduated from Calvin. My wife was a physical education teacher and coach, and we moved to Chicago. She received a full-time job teaching at Chicago Christian High School, and Trinity Christian College is right next door. So we lived right near campus, walked to our jobs for those first number of years, which was awesome. But I started at Trinity in '79 and began assistant soccer coach, was intramural director, and I taught some activity classes at Trinity. I stayed there for 23 years and moved into the ranks of assistant professor, coaching soccer for those years, as well as girls basketball. And went on to a doctorate at Springfield College. My wife was from the Boston area. We moved to the Concord, Massachusetts area so I could attend Springfield for 18 months. I had a sabbatical leave from Trinity, and I passed my doctoral qualifying exams, but I didn't get my dissertation completed. I had 2 of my 4 chapters, so I'm ABD on my doctorate of physical education.
We're going to get into the career in some later segments. I want to go back to your high school days, multi-sport athlete, which we did back then. And I was glad to see on your NIAAA bio, we're about the same age. What was that high school experience like? Were you a small town? Was Holland, the suburb, big city? What was that environment like growing up?
Yeah, it was small town, and it was interesting. That was the very beginnings of soccer in Michigan. We did not have a state playoff in soccer, so those were the very formative days of high school soccer in the state of Michigan. And it was small town, and we had some really good athletes at our school, our soccer team, our basketball teams, our track team. They were really competitive. We had many Division III athletes that played on those teams and teammates, and it was a great experience.
Yeah, I grew up in Oregon, and very similar, small town and three sports and all that. I know in Michigan there are a lot of smaller schools, whether they're D3 or private schools. You went to Calvin. Um, was that something that you thought about, and maybe your peer group thought about when you were in high school? Hey, I'm going to go to this college, or I'm going to do that, or did it just kind of fall into your lap, which is what happened to me? I wasn't even thinking about playing in college.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting that you asked that. So my father and mother both attended Calvin. They married after they attended Calvin. So it's a family connection that we had in a generation. My daughter Elizabeth graduated from Calvin and played soccer, and her coach was a former player that I played with at Calvin as well. So the connection with Calvin and our family is three generations, and it
Well,
was a good experience.
now, you mentioned the influence that your college coach had. You had that relationship with him as a faculty member, teacher, student, and athlete coach, and also as a mentor. Um, was that something through his influence that you decided to go into education, or did you kind of know that all the time because of growing up, with your dad as a coach?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the reason I decided to major in physical education my sophomore year was in part due to Marv Zeidema, but it was also in part due to my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, who was a physical education major. And she was planning on that from her freshman year. She went to Calvin sight unseen from Concord, Massachusetts. And her desire to go into physical education as we were dating was also an impetus for me to make that decision. So,
Well, I'm sure that's a great story. We're going to save that one for another time. But for our listeners, our guest today is David Ribben. He's a certified master athletic administrator, long time, college coach, instructor, and also director of athletics for the University of Chicago Lab Schools. Currently an interim AD in Pittsburgh. We're going to hear about that in one of our later segments. But let's take our first break. We're coming back with more. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com, schedule a live web demo to see their score tables and their score boards in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made as an AD was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. We use it for games, of course, but we also use it for pep rallies, for signing ceremonies. It's tremendously versatile, and the customer service is just outstanding. Go to sidelineinteractive.com, schedule that live web demo today. We also want to say thank you to Home Campus. Home Campus is a platform that you're going to use every single day. Things like scheduling, student athlete eligibility and clearance. Who doesn't do that every day? Uploading rosters, communicating with your stakeholders, digital forms, you name it. Home Campus does it. They do it better, they do it faster, and they're going to make your day a lot easier. To get started, all you have to do is go to homecampus.com. That's homecampus.com. Check them out today. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. Our guest today is David Ribbens. He's a certified master athletic administrator, retired but currently serving as the interim AD at Winchester Thurston, and that's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. David, you shared a little bit about your career after graduation, primarily at the college level, teaching and coaching. What are some things that stick out for you from those days? Maybe as a young coach, we hear the expression, "You don't know what you don't know." Did that apply to you in your early years of coaching?
yeah, definitely. My experience coaching at Trinity was a bit unique in the fact that I really was 1 or 2 years older than some of the seniors on my soccer team. So it was an interesting time and a good time for me to learn about coaching. And I definitely learned a lot through coaching. So actually, for 5 years, my wife and I coached together. My wife was the head basketball coach at Chicago Christian, and I was the volunteer assistant coach for those 5 years, and had a great experience in both of those capacities. Following that role, I ended up accepting the job as the girls basketball coach at Trinity, and learned a lot about coaching as well. So a lot of baptism by fire when it came down to the actual coaching experiences that I had at both institutions. And once again, good memories of those times, good experiences that really I built upon throughout the course of my career, being put in those situations. So I'm very grateful for both of those opportunities to be involved in coaching at a very young age in both soccer and in girls basketball. I did learn softball. I certainly played baseball, but I didn't learn how to coach softball until Trinity had the opportunity to add that as a sport. So I coached 5 years, first 5 years of Trinity's softball team back in the late 80s, early 90s as well.
Oh, yeah. And that's always cool to be involved at the start of any program, whether it's a team or an athletic department. You had a significant stint, let's say, at the college level. What was what was the attraction to, as I like to say, come over to the other side of the desk as an athletic director at University of Chicago Lab Schools? How did that happen?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the years that I was at Trinity, I certainly did a lot of different activities, right? So I was coaching, I was teaching, and I was administering. And for that length of time to do all of those extremely well became a challenge. And I left to take a job at the Hallmark Sports Club for a year and realized I missed teaching and coaching. And one of my club soccer coach parents was a teacher at the lab school, and there was an opening there, and that led me to the application at the lab school, and eventually became the athletic director there, which was the first athletic director the lab school had. Previous to my arrival, there was a teacher faculty who was also given the responsibilities to be the athletic director. And the lab school had just completed a new gymnasium on campus, and they opened up a full-time AD administrative position back in 1993, and ended up, 2003. You can scratch that. My memory got lost there a little bit. But I started there in 2003. So I was there till 2023 for those 23 years as a full-time AD in a different role. So there was an evaluation component of the coaches. There was oversight. There was greater support from the institution. And the program thrived for the past 20 years. I'm very proud of the fact that, we've made some good investments into the students in their athletic experience at the lab school.
Now, looking at your time there, what would you say was one of your greatest challenges as the athletic director? And, how did you approach that?
Yeah, it's a good question too. I think one of the challenges, the University of Chicago has a high academic reputation, the laboratory schools equally so, arguably one of the best independent schools in the country, and certainly high academic profile. And I would say that athletics would be not so much in that mix. And I think over the course of time, um, sharing the success of our students and giving information within our community to the students who chose to spend a good amount of time learning their sport from a young age. There was certainly interest on behalf of the students at the lab school to compete and to show well, right, to be competitive. And that experience of showing that ended up coming from actions rather than anything that I said. So I could argue all day that we offered a good athletics program, and I believe we did, but it showed, I mean, it was evident, it was in front of them that we did both well. And that's a significant improvement over the course of time that I was there, where our athletes showed that, you know, they did take their athletics seriously and were competitive. And, you know, they won some championships. So it was interesting watching our boys' state championship happened 99 years after our last state championship in track and field. And for those kids to realize that, A, our school was a very old school history, right? I mean, the history of that place is with John Dewey, University of Chicago, and just an amazing story there. But to realize that our boys tennis team won a state championship 99 years after the very last one. So they had won five straight track and field championships in the early 1900s, and they won it. And following that, over the course of the next 5 years, we ended up winning four more state championships in boys soccer, girls tennis, and showing to, you know, the community that, you know, we did both well. And that was probably the biggest challenge that I faced. And I would say we faced it quite well in, you know, what the kids accomplished during their sports seasons.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I think most ADs would agree. You know, we want our teams. You know, we all want to win, but you know, we want to have good academics. You know, we want to have good citizens. We want to see our rosters full. You know, we want the kids to be having fun. And oh, by the way, you know, we're trying to win a championship every now and then.
Yeah.
So good for you. Great stuff.
Yeah.
We're going to
Yeah.
take another quick break, but
Yeah.
for our listeners, our guest today is David Ribbens. He's a certified master athletic administrator, longtime AD at the University of Chicago Lab School, and currently an interim athletic director in Pittsburgh. We're going to hear more about that and more, so please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to Gipper for their support of the podcast. Go to Gipper.com. Their team will show you how to create world-class marketing content for your school to promote your athletes and celebrate your team's successes. Gipper's used and trusted by over 4,000 high school and college programs across the country. It's professional graphic design made easy. Go to Gipper.com to get started. We also want to say thanks to Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. I don't think I need to say anything more, but I'm going to. Go to hometownticketing.com and their team will show you how to set up and start selling tickets online, not just for athletic events, but things like school plays and concerts, school dances, even graduation. And here's the best part. Every school gets assigned a dedicated client success manager that's going to provide you hands-on support every step of the way. That's every step of the way. Go to hometownticketing.com to get started. It's digital ticketing that offers more. We'd also like to say thank you to Ohio University's online Master of Science in Athletic Administration. This affordable 20-month master's program focuses exclusively on interscholastic athletic administration. And when you finish, you're not only going to have your master's degree, you'll have 11 NIAAA leadership training courses that can go towards your RAA or CAA. You're also going to be part of a tremendous graduate network with connections across the country. To get started, just go to ohio.edu/info/MAA, the Ohio University Online Master of Science. Check it out today. Welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD Podcast. David, we get a lot of younger ADs or ADs that are just maybe starting their professional development journey. And you're a CMAA. That doesn't happen by accident. So if you could share with our listeners your journey, how did you get involved maybe with your state association and then with the NIAAA and talk maybe a little bit about what you did for your CMAA project?
Yeah, it's great. So when I started the job at the lab school, I realized that the NIAAA was the lead organization for high school ADs. And that summer, I went to Indianapolis and I ended up taking 4 NIAAA classes at the headquarters along with ADs from Indiana. And that was the start of my journey through those LTC classes and my certification of athletic administrator. I earned my CAA in 2004. Most of my LTC classes I took at the national conventions, and I would highly recommend for athletic directors, especially those starting out, to go to the national conventions, at least your state convention as well. Those are important opportunities to learn and grow, but also to connect with professionals. There's days in which the athletic director journey is lonely, and to have a colleague that you can call on, talk to, be honest with, and gain some support from is important. And I found the NIAAA to be that for me, both personally and professionally. And my CMA was a result of dealing with the Illinois High School Association. So the Illinois High School Association put an enrollment multiplier on non-boundaried schools, and that was not something that I supported. And over the course of probably 17 years. When I first started at the lab school, the multiplier came to be. And over those course of my time there, I had worked with the IHSA and I had been working with the Illinois Athletic Directors Association to try to combat that multiplier and worked at that. So my work with the IHSA was the meat and potatoes of my CMAA project that I completed in 2020.
So can I ask, how did that, was there a resolution to that? Did they modify it? They eliminate it? How did it work out?
Yeah, it has not been eliminated. There's 800 schools roughly in Illinois, and in order for a bylaw to change, there's 600 public schools and 200 private schools. So, in order for that to get voted out, we would need support from the public schools. And there's a bit of a back and forth between the public schools. I have pointed out, and I worked with Craig at the IHSA and Marty Hickman before that, and I wanted to be upfront because the experience that our kids get competing in the IHSA championship, it's a true state championship, and it's the largest state in the United States that has a true state championship. California, Texas, and New York have different organizations for different state championships. So there isn't really a true state champion in those 3 states. But Illinois is the largest, the 4th largest, and it really is the true state championship. So there's a huge value in having a true state championship, crowned in each sport in each year. And there's overall, the IHSA has far more value to the laboratory schools. So living with, modifying, trying to, make sure that there's at least the, private schools are being heard. We certainly accomplished that goal. Craig would often attend those meetings with private schools, and we were in constant communication. But it's still implemented. I think there's 5 different iterations of the multiplier, and there's more equity than there was when it first came out. And overall, it's a manageable tool for the private schools, and to compete with all of the schools for the state championship at the end of the day is kind of the end result, and a good thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Here in Florida, we have our classifications, and there's, you can probably find 10 people that are for it, 10 people that are, want to see it change.
Right.
And we don't have a split between public and private. It's primarily enrollment that puts you into your class, but
Right.
very interesting stuff.
Yeah.
David, we're going to do this at the end of the podcast,
Mhm.
but if one of our listeners wanted to reach out and add you to their network or maybe pick your brain about the multiplier, what's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm very available at Winchester Thurston. So my email address is d.ribbens@winchesterthurston.org. Um, I have a lot of documents pertaining to the multiplier, and I know that's a topic around the country that is important for a lot of schools. And I'm happy to be a resource for anyone who may have questions pertaining to that.
Oh, yeah. It sounds like a tremendous resource. And we'll give that email again out at the end of the podcast. Let's go and take another break. But once again, our guest today is David Ribbens, Certified Master Athletic Administrator, longtime AD. Let's take that break, but we're coming back with some more. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We'd like to thank Vital Signs Wall of Fame for their support of the podcast. You know, if you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards for all the teams, for all of your sports, or to show off your school's Hall of Fame, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Check out their interactive touchscreen. That's right, touchscreen video consoles. It's also a great way to showcase your school's proud history and some of your best moments in student athletes. The website is vitalsignswalloffame.com. Mention the podcast, you'll get a nice discount. Vitalsignswalloffame.com. We'd like to say thank you to Huddle. Go to huddle.com and change the way you see the game. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I wanted a platform that was going to work for all of our coaches and teams, and Huddle came through like a champion. Our coaches, our kids, even our parents loved all the tools that Huddle provided that let our coaches take our kids to that next level. Go to huddle.com, join the 8 million users, and turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to say thank you to SnapRaise. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraiser and ended up with little, if any, return on your investment? Stop right here. Go to snapraise.com. Hands down, the best online fundraiser out there. We used it at our school with great success. Our parents loved it. Our coaches loved it. It works. Go to snapraise.com. You can check out their other great fundraisers, or other great platforms. But if you're looking for a fundraiser, you found it. Go to snapraise.com. You're going to be glad you did. Welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD Podcast. David, you were a longtime AD, many years at the college level, and you retired, okay? And then you got a call to come back and become the interim AD at Winchester Thurston in Pittsburgh. Why come out of retirement? Obviously, you had to be impressed with the person on the other end of the phone, but what are some things that you have done in your time at Winchester Thurston to, I guess, get things going in the right direction, or the direction that you think they should be going? Because let's face it, you're a master athletic administrator.
Yeah. Yeah, so the situation happened rather quickly. In December, I received a call from the head of school, Scott Fetch. Scott was a previous lab school principal who I had a great relationship with, a lot of respect for. And my wife and I talked about it, and she supported the idea of trying to make this work and step into an interim position. And it's been a great 3 months. I have 2 months to go. I think probably trying to get back on track involved a couple things. Number one, the community here is a strong foundation of parent support. We've got great students. Our athletics program here is in good hands with a lot of great coaches. So the fundamentals, if you will, were here and were attractive to me, knowing that I think one of the strengths that I have is developing coaches and supporting coaches, and understand that the lifeblood of an athletics program is effective coaches. And I saw that when I interviewed for a couple days in December. And come January 2, we hit the ground running. And it took a little bit to get schedules and some of the mechanics, if you will, of the schedule with buses. We don't have a lot of facilities here, so we bus our middle school and high school students to various practice facilities nearby. Our home gymnasium was for basketball. We have a group of students who are involved with crew, fencing, squash, indoor track, and we've got a large number of our students that participate in our sports program. So coming in January, it took a little bit to get things back a little bit on track. But I have a young assistant athletic director who's really done a nice job. The previous athletic director is a dean of students, and Kevin was very helpful in getting things from the previous AD to my position. So Kevin was very helpful in giving me some background pertaining to the athletics program. So there was a lot of support in place to make the transition successful. And over the past 3 months, we've put things in place that have allowed us to do a better job of planning as well as organizing. We had a coaches meeting for our spring sports and parents that was well received. Our communication within the website is also very robust. So the internal communications, each team has their own webpage, and that is a site for announcements, pictures, results, any schedule. We've had rain there for the last 2 days. We're expecting rain for the next 3 days. So our spring sports are already jeopardized and trying to reschedule, which is typical, but we have the mechanism in place now where the communication can be given in a manner that's easy and appropriate for our families to understand that, we just don't have the means to have practice or a tennis match today, for instance.
Well, it sounds like, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like, you had a lot of positives in place, a history, good coaches, great leadership from above, the former AD, you got an assistant AD, which is not always the case at let's say, a smaller school. Um, looking at the Winchester Thurston department with fresh eyes, was there anything that you saw that maybe you thought to yourself, hey, this is different than the way I did it, but it seems to work? Or was there anything you saw that you said, hey, we probably need to tweak this and maybe make a change? Anything stick out that you can share?
Yeah, I think just a couple things on that. So one, just the approach within the office, right? So I'm a bit of a neatnik, and I like things organized, and I like paper. Laura Gill will attest to that. I'm sure Laura, when she talked to you, mentioned that about me. So I'm still a paper, pencil, and I'm a desk calendar guy, which is archaic and not the way it works, but it works for me. And I think just the mechanics of the office and having a spot for them. Yeah, exactly. Having a spot for the coaches to come in and check their mailbox. I have my assistant and I sit near each other, and in between us, we have a mailbox slot for each of our teams, and all papers referring to girls lacrosse, boys, girls basketball, whatever the sport is. We put papers in there, so we track and organize that way. So structurally, just some of the basic stuff that needed to take care of sends the right image when somebody comes in to an office. And if your office appears clean and organized and refreshed, if you will, that sends the right message to everyone, whether it's students, coaches, faculty that come in to say hello. That sets a tone, and I think that was one of the things that I did find to be very helpful in making those changes. The other piece, the organizational piece, was our back storage room. We had 63 bins of uniforms and things that needed to go through and reorganize that back room, knowing what we have, what we don't have, what we need, what we don't need. And just getting to that point of having kind of your hands around the entire program, that piece was an important piece as well.
Oh, I'm right there with you on uniforms. I want to walk into that room and the shelves, things are folded, they're in, see-through bins. No, I'm right there with you on that. Maybe that's an old school thing, but hey, it works, right?
With that,
Um, Real quick, parents, you were at University of Chicago Lab Schools, 20 plus years. You had that group of parents. You've been at Winchester Thurston for 3 months. You got that group of parents. Um, are parents still the same? Are they different from Chicago to Pittsburgh? What's your quick response to the parent question?
very similar. Parents want the best for their kids, and they're going to be protective, and they want to make sure that they're in good hands. And when there's questions, a lot of the parents simply need to be heard, and it's important to listen to them, and it's important to acknowledge what they're saying to you, and that's very similar, I'm sure, in most high school programs around the country.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely right. Most of the time, they just want to be heard. So very good stuff. That's a great tool, and a great way to transition into our final segment. I'd love to go on and on. I think I found a kindred spirit here, through the podcast. But we're going to take our final break. We're going to hear
Yep.
from Athletic Surveys, who sponsor the Toolbox segment. When we come back, I'm going to challenge our guest, which is David Ribbens, to send out a brand new athletic director on the very first job, but I'm only going to let him put 3 things in the toolbox. So let's hear that final shout out from Athletic Surveys, and then we'll get to the athletic director's toolbox on the Educational AD podcast. So please stay with us. We'd like to thank Athletic Surveys for sponsoring the AD Toolbox segment of the podcast. If you've never used a survey to take the pulse of your parents, your coaches, your student athletes, you're really missing out on a great opportunity. Athletic Surveys is going to connect you to your stakeholders. You probably already get feedback from the people that want to complain and gripe about things, but that's really only a small percentage. Athletic Surveys will connect you to that group, but they're also going to connect you to the 98% of your stakeholders that support your program. And that information is tremendously valuable when you're meeting with a frustrated parent or student athlete, or maybe your principal or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that's going to connect you with everybody in your program. Athleticsurveys.com. Check them out today. Well, it's that time of the podcast. We have been visiting today with David Ribbens, a certified master athletic administrator, longtime AD in Chicago, and now he's back on the job as an interim AD in Pittsburgh. Tremendous athletic background, but right now I'm going to challenge him to send out a brand new AD on their very first job, but I'm only going to let him put 3 things in the toolbox. So, David, what 3 items are going to go into your new athletic director toolbox?
Yeah, the first off is to develop your coaches. The lifeblood, as I mentioned earlier, of your athletics program is based on effective coaches, and to have the plan to develop your coaches, to get to know them, spend time with them, talking with them, and making sure that you're providing opportunities for professional development for them, and having the opportunity to spend that I guess, time aside. One of the things that I really enjoy about being the athletic director is that 2:30 to 3:30 time slot right around practice start time, and coaches coming in your office and wanting to spend that time with them, never being too busy to spend time talking to your coaches and developing that and finding ways to support them. I would encourage, maybe a very a young coach or a coach that isn't that effective. It's much better to provide them tools for them to become effective coaches and to gain confidence, and to put things in place where you can develop your coaches. That's number one. Number two is to develop emotional wisdom. during the time that you deal with conflicts, and there will always be conflicts in situations in athletics with coaches and parents and kids, officials, teammates, opposing schools, right? There's always going to be that emotional element within those situations that you need to have wisdom. And that wisdom to me is controlling your emotions, right? So being even keeled, listening to situations, knowing when to separate, when to make sure that there's a better time to talk about this, and making sure that your coaches and the situation are handled in such a way that you're both being respectful to each other, even in the midst of a disagreement. And that emotional wisdom oftentimes can come from colleagues and from your administration within your school, and talking with people that have been in situations that have gone through that and how they best handle those conflicts. So developing emotional wisdom would be the second tool in the toolbox. And the last one is, I know that there are some athletic directors that complain about their job to their coaches, and I would encourage you never to do that. What you do when you put coaches in that situation, you are looking for them to be pitting sides against other coaches within your school. And it's important for the athletic director to be handling all of their coaches fairly and dealing with them in their coaching situations, rather than them hearing about the complaints you might have about your job as an AD. And it's important for the coaches to be supported, and your support does not come from your coaches. Your support comes from fellow ADs, whether it's a conference in the local. It comes from your administration, so your principal, your director of school. That's where your support comes from. And for you to depend on your coaches to put them in an understanding situation where you're frustrated, and there are long days, right? There are times in which you feel alone, and that support does not come from your coaches, kids, or parents. It comes from your colleagues and from your administration.
Boy, those are all such great. We've had those suggestions before, but I don't think we've ever had them phrased using that particular language. Just great, great perspective from a master athletic administrator. Thanks so much for sharing those.
Very good.
David, we did this earlier, but let's do it again. If one of our listeners wanted to reach out, add you to their network, as you talked about, building that network of ADs, or just pick your brain. And listeners, I think you got a tremendous resource here. What's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
Yeah, so my email address at Winchester Thurston is d.ribbens, Ribbens, at winchesterthurston.org. Happy to connect.
Well, David Ribbens, thanks so much for spending a little bit of time with our listeners today. All the best with your spring sports there at Winchester Thurston, and let's maybe plan to get you back on the podcast later on. I think you got a great story to share.
Very good. Thank you.
For our listeners, we appreciate you tuning in. And just a reminder, we upload the Zoom recordings of all of our podcasts to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We do this just about every day with either interviews or shorter segments. All we try to do is share best practices. So come back next time for another great episode of the Educational AD Podcast.